Welcome back to the Doc Talk Podcast. It's been a while, and I got to be honest with you, Dr. Rob Zatechka, our listeners have been pissed off, and I mean really, really pissed off. I was starting to get Facebook messages on my private Facebook page. The emails were coming in.
Oh, really?
Yes.
See, I'm only looking at the Twitter messages.
Yeah, and so let me give an explanation of where the hell we have been. The last time we recorded was like late May, and then my daughter got married. And before that, my daughter graduated college down in New Orleans. Then my daughter got married, and then you went to Florida.
Other daughter got married.
Yes.
This is two different occurrences.
Two different occurrences, and it was just like my time was eaten up, my money was eaten up, and you decided to go off to Florida and have a little bit of a vacation.
It was nice.
What'd you do?
I sat on a beach. I ate seafood. I drank beer.
You couldn't ask for anything more than that, man.
It was good. Well, and our oldest daughter, Brennan, lives in Florida. She graduated from Florida State this past December. And it's kind of weird because it used to be during the summer. It was like, well, do you have a break? Do you want to come back home for a couple of weeks? It's like, no, I don't have a break. I have a job.
Well, it's good that she's employed.
It's like, oh, wait, that's right. You're like real world.
She's
now.
a grown-up now, Rob.
You can't just like up and leave. She's like, I can take off 2 days that week you're down there to come hang out with you guys on the beach. So she did that.
Okay.
But it's one of these things. All of a sudden you're wrangling kind of like the full-time real life thing. So it's actually kind of cool to see your kids going into that stuff. So
they're becoming professional. They're growing up before your very eyes.
Adulting.
And you were at the wedding. And if I can say, looking back, and I'm being biased because it was the wedding, we had the most wonderful wedding in the history of weddings.
That was pretty damn cool.
It
was a great location. Was cool. Food was amazing.
When you can have a full alligator, a full fucking alligator.
You flew a chef up from New Orleans.
I did. And then we did shrimp and grits.
Dude, the shrimp and grits were...
Yeah, we had 0 shrimp and grits left because Rob decided to eat them all. Every single bit.
Not.
You ate them all. We had no shrimp and grits left. Nothing.
You had like 2 pans full of grits left.
The alligator was gone. The shrimp was gone. You ate all... I know you took the last helping of shrimp. I know you did.
I might have, but they were... I'm shutting up.
If you are watching on YouTube now, you're seeing that our production's a little different. We're a one-camera shoot tonight. Can you believe that? I think Owen quit on us.
He ditched.
I think he quit. I think he felt he wasn't getting paid enough. Either that or he's just sick of his old man.
Okay, I'm the one who tells you need to pay him more.
I try. It's not like this podcast makes a lot of money. I pay you.
That's true. Well, keep in mind, he does also have a day job.
He does have a day job, but and with the studio still being kind of mixed up, it's hard to, just kind of put everything into place. But if you are watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's very easy. Of course, you'll get the updates when we put new content up, and we do appreciate you subscribing. Keep getting our subscriber numbers up because that helps us out a lot. Going to be honest, we make a little money off that, so not much, but the more subscribers we have, the better it helps us out, and that way we can keep doing this podcast on a regular basis. And also, if you don't watch on YouTube, but you listen on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast, just make sure to hit the subscribe button and leave a review and a rating if you can. Give us 5 stars. We like 5 stars. If you hate our guts, still give us 5 stars because that helps us out. We have a guest today. We have a guest who I've known going back to the 90s. You've known for a long time. And I was just thinking, Steve Warren, by the way, former Husker, you and I haven't probably talked since you launched Dream Academy back when I was on Big Sports 590.
I was trying to figure out when the last time I've actually seen you. It's been way too long.
It's been a long
time. I couldn't remember when it was.
Man.
See, I never say that. So.
You see him enough? You had enough of him already?
So what have you been up to, man?
Same. Dream, kids, family, Warren Academy. Trying to stay out of trouble. That's the number one thing I've been trying to do is just stay low, stay out of everybody's way.
Have you ever been in trouble in your entire life?
No, not really. But
okay.
I'm doing good at it though. I'm still trying to stay out of trouble. So that's the best part about it. I'm doing well.
What's the most trouble you've ever been in? Seriously, was it speeding ticket?
Man, I pulled the fire alarm when in 6th grade.
That's it?
And my dad almost killed me. That's the one that changed my life. Like I knew I never wanted to be in too much trouble again after that one. But fire department, police came. It was rough.
No shit.
Oh yeah, it was the whole thing. Yeah, it was rough. Yeah, I didn't sit straight for about 2 weeks after that. Pops got a hold of me. He made sure I remembered that one.
How'd they catch? Did you just fess up to it, or did they know? Oh, little Stevie did it.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things too. Like I was planning, like I wasn't really going to pull it, and one of my buddies was leaving the school as I had my hand on it and yanked my arm down.
Oh.
So I shouldn't have been there. Should have done it. Shouldn't have been playing like it anyway. So it was my fault just for being in the situation. But I had a little help pulling it, and I just kind of froze after it happened because the alarms went out. So I'm not too good of a criminal.
So did your dad scared the hell out of you? But did the whole scare tactic? Did they bring in the cops and everything like that to go? Hey, this is a crime.
They knew my dad, so they knew that shit was going to be enough. So they were like, hey, he's gonna be all right. We don't have to worry. They knew Pops was going to take care of it.
Your dad a hard ass?
Oh yeah, old military drill sergeant. He was the real deal.
Wow. Did you ever think about military when you're growing up or not?
No, he scared me out of that too. I wasn't going to do that. Now we were sports people, so we knew it was sports somewhere around there.
Was he a football player or what?
No, he's from Hartville, Missouri. So small town in Missouri. They didn't have football. It was just basketball, baseball, some track, and he boxed. So him and my uncles were boxers too. So they boxed in the military but it was all baseball and basketball. My mom was actually from Lawton, Oklahoma, where Will Shields, Mike Minner, and
because weren't you born in Lawton?
I was born in Lawton.
Okay, I
was born in Lawton, so Lawton is actually home. So mom was the football background, really. She was really the football junkie, and dad was kind of learning it, as they were together. So yeah, so that's how the football thing came along. But dad was more basketball and baseball.
Wow. Was your dad athletic? Was your mom athletic? How did you get started?
My mom played all the high school sports available at the time. I think she was a basketball player all through high school, and that was in Iowa. She
6-on-6, baby.
Valley High, West Des Moines.
I didn't know she was a Valley grad.
Yeah. Went through Valley through her junior year, and then the family had moved to Burlington. And so she actually graduated from Burlington High School, but she was most of her high school kind of cut her teeth growing up in Des Moines.
Wow, I did not. For some reason, I didn't know that.
But yeah, she played basketball in high school, and she did, I thought track and tennis.
Okay.
And then my dad was a football and baseball guy. So didn't do, worked all winter, worked all summer, but then played baseball and football. So baseball was his sport. He actually played a couple years of college ball.
So I'm sure you've told this story before. You were born in Lawton. You got your mom's from Lawton. Did you grow up a Sooner fan or a Cowboy fan?
I actually grew up a Sooner fan. I grew up a OU fan. Actually, OU and Florida State. Like as I got older, I started to like Florida State, and then Nebraska was nowhere on the radar until they started winning, of course, and then I'm like, well, I kind of like those guys too. They're winning. They seem to like me. I think it'll work out.
So what was the recruiting process like? I mean, when you were coming out of high school, where all were you looking?
So Alabama, Kansas State, Kansas, most of the Big 8, Big 12 world. So we were the first year of the Big 12, right? So OU didn't recruit me, actually. It was mainly Kansas State, Mizzou, Alabama, Kansas, Illinois.
Who was the coach at Alabama at the time?
I can't remember. They were going through all the probation, kind of in and out of trouble during that time. There was a couple different coaches in and out.
So that's coming off Gene Stallings. Gene Stallings had left
already. It was after him. Yeah.
Okay.
Then Mike Price was there for like 3 months before he went to a strip club. Never go to a strip club when you're a head coach. It's just a bad scene. Or never go to a strip club if you're an athletic director. You might be asked to leave too.
Right.
I've heard stories, but
inside joke there.
Killing me. Typical Iowa
was
guy.
Was it Shula then? Would it have been Shula at that point?
It might have been Shula.
Yeah.
Whoever was there didn't stay long. They might have been there like a year or two, and I think they got fired too because it was like probation, back on probation, off probation, trying to get back right. So I can't remember, but Bob Stoops was at Kansas State.
Okay.
So I was close. Kansas State was actually, I really liked Bob Stoops. So
when I was coming out of high school, Mike and Mark, was it Mark? No, it would have been Mike and Bob were both at Kansas State at the time. So Mark's who's at Kentucky now.
Mark's at Kentucky, right?
So it was Mike and Bob were at Kansas State, and they recruited Nebraska.
Yeah.
So, once a week I'd get my call from one of the Stoops brothers, and they would have you darn near. You'd hang up the phone with them,
thinking I'm going.
Yeah, you would be convinced you were going to go to K-State.
And I think I took my visit to Illinois. I came to Nebraska, which was a terrible visit. It was like a snowstorm. It was bad. It was a really bad visit. And then Illinois, Nebraska, Kansas. I got shot at Kansas this visit.
In Lawrence?
No, we were outside of Lawrence. We went to some party like near Kansas City somewhere. And a fight broke out with, of course, the football players and some local guys.
So was Glenn Mason
started
the coach
shooting at the guys?
Was
it
Glenn
was Glenn Mason.
Glenn Mason?
It was Glenn Mason.
Did you have to go back and say, I almost got shot last night?
No, they didn't. I don't know if they ever even found out. I don't know if they even found out because it was just like a late night party. Wow. Guys got into a fight. It was an interesting recruiting trip, but Nebraska was a snowstorm. It was bad. It was a bad trip too. So
who was your host on your Nebraska trip?
Damon. Benny. And I'm pretty sure he just dropped me off somewhere too. I'm pretty sure Damon got the pizza and went somewhere else. I can't remember exactly, but we ended up at of course, a party, and I just remember J.R. Edwards.
Yeah,
we were in the same recruiting class, and J.R. was a local guy, right? So I just remember every Nebraska guy wanted to beat up J.R. at the party because J.R. was a character, like super boisterous, and he was in the party telling all the receivers how he was going to take the job the next year, and they were going to get him. They were going to get him. That was actually pretty fun.
So you talk about that. I mean, the experiences you have on these visits.
Yeah.
What was the draw to Nebraska?
Winning.
It was winning.
Winning. Like I mean, growing up, I'd always been a part of like winning cultures, right? So we won a lot in the youth, middle school, high school. Never really won a state title in football. We got close. Finished in the semis my senior year, but I could never just see myself going anywhere that just wasn't a winning culture. And then the thing that really kind of drew me the most was, Coach Osborne came to the house a couple days after you guys whooped Florida. I think he flew in like 2 or 3 days afterwards. And so it was kind of hard to say no to that, right? Back to back, just whooped Florida. And now he's in the house a few days later, and Coach Osborne. It's hard to say no to that guy once he's sitting in front of you.
He is kind of I was going to say in person, I mean, he's so dry.
Yeah.
When you see him on the media. And he's kind of like that in person too. But the thing is, the guy's got kind of this low-key charisma that, I don't know, it resonates with so many people.
Well, I go back to our podcast with Brendan Stye, who, here's a Southern California kid. He had Arizona State on his radar, fell in love with Nebraska because of a poster in the weight room. But it wasn't until Coach Osborne showed up at his school, and that closed the deal, man. It was just like, okay, I'm going to go. I had a great visit, but when Osborne showed up at his door at home, that was the thing that closed the deal.
Yeah.
So
see, for me, it was. See, my experience is that I grew up in Lincoln.
No, yeah. So you're
entrenched. I was the hometown kid. So believe it or not, Michigan State was way high on my radar for a while. Both my parents were actually Michigan State grads. And so I kind of got brought up as the Spartan fan. And then I had this weird thing where it was Pac-10, well, now Pac-12, but now they don't exist. But it was all the old Pac-10 schools. So I got really heavily recruited by like Washington, Stanford, UCLA. And so UCLA was really, really enticing to look at. One, it was LA. The weather's nice. And I think they had like Terry Donahue was like Bowden. He had like this streak of like 9 straight bowl game wins. And so they were one of those programs that they're churning out NFL guys, winning games. I wanted to win, and I get that. That's one thing that I think is I don't know how much it plays into kids' attitudes now coming out of high school.
It's different now.
It is. Everything else. But when I came out of high school, I never got close to a state title. It took me 3 years to get 10 wins in high school.
Because you went to East.
That's rough.
He went to Lincoln East. They weren't going to win football games.
That's brutal.
It makes me feel bad, dude. I loved Lincoln East. Anyway, which...
Or the Omaha Northwest of Lincoln.
I coached in Northwest. Man,
we'll get to that in a little bit.
Where's the liquor at? What are you talking about? Where's that?
I was sitting there thinking like, okay, you know what? If I go to Nebraska, I'm guaranteed 9 wins a year. No matter you're going to get it. You're going to get the bowl game. You win the conference, you're going to have an outside shot at playing for a national title. So Yeah, the winning thing there was, I mean, that was a real big motivator.
Now, you graduated, 99?
90 college.
Yes.
99,
So,
yeah, college.
And I've said this before. I do a radio show in Des Moines, and I talk about the greatest teams that I've ever got to cover. Of course, 94 was there, 95 was there. 97, I don't think was one of the greatest teams I covered. I'll say this, I'll go to my grave saying the 99 team was...
We were good.
You were really good.
Yeah.
And if
One
Buck
fumble.
Halter and
Yeah.
Dan Alexander don't fumble down at Texas,
Yeah.
you guys win that whole thing. That,
Right.
I mean, and I look back at that Fiesta Bowl, and that was
Tennessee.
T. Martin was the quarterback. Charlie McBride put an incredible defensive game plan together that game, and that was just a dominant performance. I always look at that 99 team as probably the one that should have won a national title.
The one that got away.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one that got away. So those guys, of course, Buck Halter's a real good friend of mine. I just talked to him another day, but it's like one of those things that haunts you, right? Like you're so close and you know how good you are, and then you're watching two teams play in the national title game, and you're like, we'd destroy these two teams if we had a chance. But back then is when the computers first started.
Yeah.
So the computers didn't like us.
Yeah, the damn computers.
It's such a
play it out.
It's one of those things. At that time, though, I was like a staunch, hardcore bowl game guy.
Yeah.
Even then, like 99, early 2000s. And now for, I don't know, probably the last 10 years, I've been one of these guys that
Time to go.
we need a playoff.
Yeah.
I mean, let's get some of these teams in there because that's a team that would have hit the playoffs and done damage.
For sure.
So you go to the Green Bay Packers. You play a couple seasons with the Packers. You end up back in Omaha. Why'd you pick Omaha to settle down?
Well, my wife at the time, you guys know how it is. Like you go where to keep her happy at. But she's from Columbus. Plus, I had to finish my degree, and I came back to finish my degree in like 2004. And when I was back, before I went and played a few years arena after that, we actually came back here like 2005, 2006. But just coming back here, it felt like the best place for me to be to like start over. Like I knew football was done. My knee was trashed. Like I knew I was just hanging on by a thread. I was just trying to make it to the next part or whatever I was going to do in life. And Lincoln was just the most logical place to come back and start over. And I knew I had support. Like I knew that I had people around that I could trust and that would advise me on next steps and where to go and what to do and how to get there. So Lincoln was the best place. And plus, I love Springfield, Missouri, my hometown, but I just knew I could never. At that time, I couldn't grow up there. I grew up there. It was great growing up there, but I knew I didn't want to live there, and there was no really other place besides maybe we thought about Texas, Kansas City. But we made the right choice.
Yeah, it's funny. I just drove through Springfield a couple weeks ago, and I like Springfield. I think Missouri State's a great university and stuff, but I've never driven through there and gone, God, I want to live here.
Right. It's not that type of place. Like, great place to visit, spend a couple days, and then you go to some areas, and you're like, wow, it's kind of rough in some areas down there. It's a different spot.
Hey, I do want to mention that we've had a lot of people reach out on the podcast and say they like the G-Defy shoes. Rob's wearing his G-Defys right now.
I am.
And the truth is, we want you to try out G-Defy. I wear G-Defy. Rob wears G-Defy. It's revolutionary comfort that highlights Gravity Defy's Verso Shock technology. It's clinically proven to relieve knee pain, transforming harmful shock into positive energy to enhance the comfort and performance. They got a wide range of styles. You bought one for the operating room, too.
Yeah.
So
I got a few pairs now.
So I need you to snap a photo of you in the operating room.
Dude, I do need to do that.
So you can focus on your foot health. You get a 60-day Try Defy guarantee. Mention you get the risk-free trial that allows you to just try these shoes out. If you don't like them, you can send them back. Go to gravitydefier.com. That's gravitydefier.com. Use the promo code DocTalk20 at checkout to save $20 on orders of $100 or more before taxes and shipping, or use the promo code DocTalk30 at checkout to save $30 on orders of $150 or more before taxes and shipping. That's gravitydefier.com. I'm a believer. Rob's a believer. Maybe we'll get Steve to be a believer.
You had me at knees. You mentioned the knees.
They are weirdly comfortable.
It's an orthopedic shoe, but it does amazing things for your ankle,
and
your knee.
Because I broke my ankle back in January.
That's not fun.
It's the only shoes I wear that the ankle feels good in. So, which I do. I got a buddy, which is interesting because you said your wife's from Columbus. Mm-hmm. So my buddy John in Columbus bought a pair because we were hanging out at a wrestling tournament. And he's like, what kind of shoes are those? And I'm like, well, let me tell you. And so he bought a pair, and he has kind of crappy knees, and he said it has helped a ton.
So there you go.
It makes a difference. Those feet.
It does.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you're standing a lot, which you are. So you come back, you form the Dream Foundation. That's when you and I really connected. When I was on Big Sports 590, which doesn't exist anymore now. It's like ESPN Radio 590 or whatever it is. But then you became the head coach at Northwest. And I made a joke about Northwest, and I'm just having fun. I don't want all the North because the one thing he did at Northwest was bring the coolest uniforms in the state. You designed the coolest uniforms in the state. That didn't last very long.
Yeah.
What was it? Just culture? What?
No. So the big thing for that transition was we were training, right? We'd started Warren Academy, and we were doing that. And I had a parent that approached us about coaching at Concordia. So we started at Concordia,
that's right.
We started at Concordia, which was we just like punishment. There was a school that hadn't won a game I don't know how long. Like it's like one of those things like, let's go see what we can do to help, right? Like, so we went to Concordia, had some success. Clinton Childs was at Northwest at the time. So Clinton called me and was like, hey, just try it. I think we can make some things happen over here. So I was like, I'm up for a challenge. So we went over there and did some work, but it was around the same time that Warren Academy was starting to take off. And it was one of those things where I was just burning the candle at both ends in the wrong way. Like, I just couldn't be a head football coach and run an organization. And so I had to pick between being a coach and running this organization. So if I could have done both forever, I'd still be coaching. But it just wasn't possible, not having a family too. So it was just one of those things that it was good at Northwest. It was rough. Like we had some challenges, and it's a challenging program for a lot of different reasons. It's not just Northwest's fault, right? Yeah. There's like a lot of stuff that goes into that. But it was really just the family, the organization. Dream was growing, Warren Academy was growing, and I couldn't do all that at once.
Rob and I have this conversation, especially when Benson was getting beat, 70, 92 to nothing. Do you think there should be at the high school ranks, and you're around high school kids a lot now, do you think, having been in the OPS system, that they should take like Northwest and Benson and combine them with North? Combine
absolutely.
Those numbers, and that would help winning out, builds morale a little bit. You're going to get the kids who really care about football. You're not worried about numbers. Is there any way to solve what's going on at Benson, South, or Northwest?
I think it's a state issue more than anything else, right? I think the state looks at enrollment by boys and the number of students in a school, but when it comes to sports, it's really about participation.
Yeah.
Like, you can have 2,000 kids in a school, but if you only have 30 kids coming out for football, you can't play Class A football. Even though your school is that size, like, it's just not possible. So I think if the state came in and said, we're gonna do a 3-year rolling win-loss record, participation, and look at all those factors, and some of these Class B schools should go to A, some of these A schools should go down to B, some of these C schools should maybe move up to B or move it around that way, I think it would be better, because you have, like, look at Scott volleyball, right? Like,
absolutely dominant.
Absolutely dominant. Like, why not take that school and drop some teams down from A and let them come up to A and compete, right? Or when it comes to football, like, let those lower level teams that don't really have a shot move down so they can be competitive. Because now what you're seeing is kids aren't going to come out and play if they know they're going to get. There's no more like building a 25-year program and a coach is going to be there for 25 years. Like, kids aren't going to schools that are traditionally losing. They're not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
And now that you don't have those boundaries where you have to go into school and everything's open enrollment, it's just not going to happen. You're not going to really – it's going to be too hard to build a program over a 10-year stretch, because these kids are with you maybe 2 years, and then they want to go win, right? They want to go somewhere where they can win. If they see it's like not winning and we don't have a shot, and then they're leaving, and they don't have to stay anymore. So it's there's a lot of issues that go into it, but definitely combining programs, letting some programs drop. I'm also an advocate of saying that all schools don't have to have all sports. Like, why would you have a football team if you got 20 kids coming out, freshmen through varsity? Like, you're not going to compete at any level, not even at the freshman level, the JV level, or the varsity level. Like, you just should just drop the sport until more kids come out.
Well, in that, I mean, by the end of the season, injury is going to wrap you up, and you're not going to have anybody left anyway. I mean, I know it was hard to recruit the Northwest. Rob, over West Side, they cheat all the time.
When I'm so whoa, my son's there now, so be careful with that. We're West Side group in here now, so
I'm joking. I give him a hard time.
Well, because one of the things that always kind of bothers me a little bit, because you hear a lot of discussion about transfers at the high school level, and you do see a fair amount of it. But when you look at, say, a school, let's take West Side, for instance. Yeah. The bulk of the guys that have gone through West Side within that football program, they may have opted in, but they all started there.
Right.
They were there in middle school through high school. It wasn't one of these things where they all came in. You got some guys. I know when Coach Lamonji came over from Burke, there was a handful of Burke guys that followed him, and I totally get that. And I did not expect that to happen. When he came over, I was, it wouldn't surprise me if a whole bunch of Burke guys transferred to West Side, and they all did because they followed a coach that has a pretty good winning track record and had played with him at Burke and. Yeah, I can see those guys following him. I don't have a problem with that. But, the bulk of that West Side, the foundation of those teams over the last half dozen years, it's all kids that have gone through there all the way through. They weren't transfers in. Now, you did have some transfers.
Yeah.
And if you look at those kids individually that transferred, there were very good reasons why they transferred. So I don't have a big problem with that. It's not always chasing hey, we're going to just go where the winning team is all the time. There's a lot of other factors, but it is interesting. Now, the question I'm going to kind of piggyback off of that, should we even allow transfers at the high school level? When I was in high school, you could not.
Well, they have open enrollment now. That's the problem.
Yeah, you didn't have the open enrollment when I was in high school.
I think certain places, like OPS. Let's just talk OPS. I think they would benefit more now if they were to close their borders and do like Elkhorn and Gretna. Like, you live here, you play here, right? Like, I think they would benefit more. But then it also could backfire because those kids where I live in such and such a district, I don't want to play there. I'm just going to opt in to a non-OPS school. So I think if everybody was closing the borders, it would go back to like the old school, like where you live here, that's where you play at. But I don't know now, it's out of the box now, right? So it's
I was going to say, that's a good point.
It's so far out of the box now. It's just now, what do you do with it? It's really just trying to figure out, how to keep kids at your school and in your district. And a lot of it just goes back to stuff that you can't control at a football program, right? Sometimes you can't control what's happening in the building. And that's what keeps some kids from going to certain schools, is like what's going on inside of the building. Not just the football program. It might be a great football coach there. Like, we had great coaches at Northwest. There were certain things that were going on inside of the building that some parents were like, no, I can't. And you have to look at it and say, I get it. Like, I'm a parent too. Like, that there's concerns I'd have sending my kid at certain places. So there's a lot that goes on, and that's not always fair because it's not always a district problem. Sometimes it's just, a perception, and the things that they think's going on may not be going on there, but the perception's been that way for so long as perception becomes reality. So
you get out of coaching, you get into the Warren Academy, and you're still coaching because of the Warren Academy.
Right.
But you're developing at this point. I think you were a little bit ahead of the game here, right? We always saw it with the AAU with baseball and the U trip, and AAU with basketball. Football is one of those sports where 7-on-7 really started taking over, and then the development aspect. How much has the Warren Academy grown over the years?
We've numbers wise. We're busting at the seams a lot of times. It's a good problem to have, but we're one of those groups that we believe so much in fundamentals and doing things the right way. And one of our taglines this past year has been development over hype, because so much now in sports and in training is just hype. It's just like who can make the best video, who can put out the coolest graphic. it's not really the substance of what's happening inside of the training and the development. And our thing is like, we're not the group that's going to make the best videos or do the coolest graphics or have the most trendiest stuff going on. But when you come here, we're going to coach you, we're going to train you, we're going to tell you the best advice we can that we know for the circumstances that you're in. And that's what we believe in, is the full development, the holistic approach of not just the position that you're playing, but what you're doing at home with mom and dad, what you're doing in the school, like how it all plays together, how you're taking care of yourself, how you're taking care of your family, your community. Like, we believe in that whole approach. So if you come over to us, it's not just going to be about sports. It's going to be about, hey man, like, pick up your trash. Like, don't leave your, like, what are you doing? Like, it's going to be about more like nurturing than anything. And that's what we really believe in. And I've been fortunate enough to have guys that like Tony Veland, that's great people, right? John Taglin, who's a teacher. Niles Paul is back. DeMornay Pearsonell, just great. They're great football people. Justin Camrad, who's a head coach at Lewis Central, he helps out. Like, there's so many good coaches and good people that are around the academy that's what really helps us keep winning. It's not just, we develop great athletes. Like, we're helping develop good people too. And the thing that's happening now is we've got guys that have gone on to play that are coming back, and now they're coaching at the academy too. So it's become full circle.
I'm curious, how did all of this get started?
Organically. I had a kid that approached me when I was finishing playing, and he's like, hey, I play D-line. Could you, help, teach me a few things? Of course. So we go out to the field and do some drills. And I got a friend that plays defensive back. Like, who do you know? I was like, call Tony. Got a kid looking. So this is really how it started. The dream thing started because my best friend's mother was a principal at Walnut Hill Elementary, and same type of thing. She said, well, you're back in town. I know you're here for a little bit. Will you come talk to the kids? A lot of our kids want to go on and play pro sports and play at Nebraska. Can you just tell them what it takes to get there? So we went back, and Deontay Grigsby, who played at Nebraska, he and I started going into Walnut Hill and talking to the kids. Brandon Williams, who played at Central, he's actually my cousin, played at Michigan.
Really? I didn't know that.
So him, Deontay, another young lady named Ashley Freeman, we started going into the schools and just talking to kids about, life, sports. You want to be an athlete, this is what it takes. So a lot of the stuff started organically. It wasn't really something that I got out and said, hey, I want to start a nonprofit for kids and do training. It really didn't happen that way. It just kind of just grew this way, and we developed it into what it is today.
So you're busting at the seams. Here is, in being in the sports media for as long as I was, my problem with U-Trip, select volleyball, AAU, they sell the dream, right? I've seen a lot of kids. Are you the type that sits down with the kid and said, hey, here's the deal. You're an NAIA player. You're a Division II player. I mean, because sometimes it becomes pretty apparent you're not going to be a Division I, and you don't want to hit that dream and say, hey, you're good enough to play, but you better have realistic expectations. Do you do that with
we have uncomfortable conversations all the time. It's just like, hey, you're probably not going to get a Power 5 offer, right? But there's nothing wrong with Morningside. Great program. They win a lot. They've got guys that have made it to the NFL. One thing I always tell some of our football kids is I've never really had a kid that's come through the academy that's gone on to play college football that we've advised him to go play at Wayne State or Northwest Missouri State that have come back and said, I had a miserable time. I hated my time in college. It's not I can't tell you anybody that's ever came back and said, I hated playing college football at any level. Like, most people that have gone on to play college football, unless it was just like a terrible coach and a terrible experience, which happens at all levels, they've really had a good time, and they've been glad that they chose the path that they chose. So it's trying to get kids to understand is like, yeah, D1 is the dream for everybody, right? Like, everybody wants to go D1. But there is good things happening at every level. You're gonna want to just get school paid for. Right? If somebody's willing to pay for you to go to school, like, take the money, go get the school paid for, because it's not cheap to go to school anymore. Like, help set yourself up for your future. Like, don't put that stress on yourself if you can. Unless you can afford it, unless mom and dad did great and they put money away and college is already paid for. That's what, 3% of the world that's just like that? It's not too many people that has that opportunity.
My kids are in debt up to their asshole. I mean, Rob can pay for all. He's a doctor. He's got all the money in the world. I made my kids take out loans. I'm like, hey, you want to go here? You got to borrow money. Rob just writes checks.
Yeah,
Rob's in that 3%.
Take the money, right? Go get school paid for.
Our kids rock the scholarships.
Yeah. Scholarships, man, and that's what kids don't understand. There's scholarships at every level.
Yeah.
And, a lot of these lower levels too, they're very creative at how they can help you pay for a school.
Yeah. Private schools are really creative.
Yeah, very creative.
Yeah, I mean, my kids went to Loyola, New Orleans, cheaper than go to Lincoln.
Right.
And so, go to New Orleans. It's a cultural capital of the world.
It's a no-brainer.
Right? Yeah,
right?
I mean,
yeah.
No, but I love the thoughts on going to the smaller schools and just go where the opportunity's at. And I saw that with my own son when he was coming out of high school, and he was because he did Warren Academy, and he. I mean, for him, and he was a real late comer. Mm-hmm. He was one of these kids where it was.
By the way, he's big. He's put on some muscle and some weight.
He's about 290, 295 right now.
Wow.
So we went to the gym the other night, and I'm watching him. I'm spotting him on squat. I'm just like, wow.
So you get some playing time this year?
I think so.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, he was a redshirt freshman this past year and got in at the end of a handful of games and. It was cool, but I mean, he's up at Augustan. It's a D2 school, and when he came out, it was when he made that decision of I think I kind of would like to give this a try. I mean, that was where we looked. We're NAIA and D2 and D3 schools, and the experience has been amazing. I mean, that's kind of the biggest thing is just it's an amazing experience. And you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned that you've never had anybody who's gone to one of these smaller schools and come back and said, yeah, that sucked.
Yeah.
And you talk to all of these kids that we knew kind of through the recruiting process where they're at now. They're at other smaller schools. And my own son, man, all of them are having a blast. They're playing a sport in college.
Right.
I mean, that's still, I don't know what the true number is. I always told my son, I was like, hey, if you're playing in a sport in college at all, you're basically a 1% of anybody who's ever played that sport. So.
And Augustana, like that Kelly Shelton who recruited there, I love that guy.
Oh,
love that guy.
Such a good dude.
Love that guy. So it's such you meet. We've been fortunate enough to meet guys like him, like that that they truly care about kids.
They do.
Right. So they truly care about kids. So you try to push those kids to like, hey, don't shun this program, right? These guys, they're going to win. They're doing it the right way. Like, give them a shot. So it's really that advice that we care the most about is like telling kids the truth. And like you said, there's a lot of programs that just I want the best kid to come here. And we're not that group. Like, we don't care if you're a kid that can't walk and chew bubble gum or if you're the top rated player in the state. We're going to coach you the same way. We're going to tell you the same things that we're telling them. It's not just a lot of programs that I kind of laugh because you see some of these groups that they only go after like the top guys, right? And we're just not that group. Like, if you want to come here and train, fine. If you don't, fine. We're going to coach the same people the same way.
With what you do with the speed and agility and the 7-on-7, do you have competition in this town? I mean, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, you have such good brand awareness. I didn't know that anybody was really competing against you in that space.
Yeah, I mean, there's other groups there, and there's always going to be competition in this space because now you see with the social media and so many guys, there's so many trainers now that are doing different things. There's guys that do good stuff too, and we always tell people like, hey, he's a good speed guy. They have a great strength program, and our program's not for everybody, right? Like sometimes and it's just like anything else, you might not click with one of our coaches. Right, you have to go somewhere that you can trust people, right? And if you don't click with one of our coaches, that's fine, but go to a place that's best for you. So, but we just feel like we're the best at what we do, especially when it comes to football. Now we've actually changed our model. We were like a multi-sport group for a long time. This last year, we decided we're just going to stick with the sports that we have the most kids from and that we have the most success, which is soccer and football. So we're inside the building right here across the street at the Omaha Sports Complex, and Sporting is a great partner of ours. So we train a lot of soccer kids and we train a lot of football kids. So between those two groups, it's like that's the one thing about the competition. There's plenty of kids playing sports. So we don't have to. I mean, it's always kind of funny when people just get so territorial about training kids. Like, how many kids are playing youth sports and that are playing football? Like, astronaut. The numbers are crazy. Like if you can't get enough kids to train, something's wrong.
So let me ask you about when should you start training? Because I don't know. I see parents throw their kids, especially baseball, 7, 8, 9 years old, and I'm like, just let them be a kid.
Right.
I mean, there's a time to do it and a time to not. I look at these special. I see kids playing year-round baseball at 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm like, really? Let them just go be kids for a little.
Most of those kids are done by 8th grade.
Exactly.
They're done.
All three of us, I guarantee. Remember that kid in elementary that was the best athlete in the whole class? Every time high school came around, he didn't even play sports in high school, right?
Right. I take my own son as an example. Grew up, of course, around all of this stuff, right? But I never forced him to come and train 4 or 5 times a week. I never forced him to just do football. I actually wanted him to play soccer for as long. If I could have kept him in soccer until he was like in the 8th grade, I would have. If I could have kept him just doing something else besides football, I would have done it. But it was just, he's a meathead. Like 3rd grade, he was like, Dad, I can't. No more soccer. Like, I'm going to go play football. So fine, I couldn't keep him out of it. But he probably only came to the academy. He was there a lot, but he wasn't there like formally training, like probably twice a week. And we started him around the 3rd grade. He grew up there. But
that's a different story.
It's a different story, but probably like the 3rd grade is like where I kind of advise, like start doing stuff. Start getting them moving in the 3rd grade.
Okay.
Don't pick a sport. Like don't pick a sport. Make them play all the sports you can make them play. And if you want to do like speed and agility and stuff, like 3rd, 4th grade, you can start doing it, but don't do it 6 times a week. Like for younger kids, do it twice a week. And the way that we do things is we are really more focused on, even at the high school level, we're really more focused on how you're doing it than really what you're doing, right? Like, so it's not really, we're not going to put bars in a 3rd grader's hand, right? There's really a lot of body weight stuff, like more coordination drills, things like that. That's just going to help them with being an athlete or for any sport. We're big track people. Like, start them running early, right? Start them in track, start them in sports like that first. Then football, football's not for everybody. So that's the thing kind of kills me the most is sometimes I get parents and I have to tell them like, hey, your kid's just don't force him to play football. Like if he's scared out there, like don't put him on the football field.
You see a lot of kids who play football for a long time who do not like playing football.
Right.
They just do because they don't want to let their dad down, right? I mean, it's like
or their buddies.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of reasons. So, but
I mean, I remember Bo Pelini. I'll never forget that one of the greatest conversations I had with Bo, and I know Bo can be a polarizing name, but we were sitting in the Larry the Cable Guy lounge, and it was right before the Florida bowl game. His first year, right? Because that would have been Dabo Sweeney's first year at Clemson, the year they beat Clemson.
Oh, the Gator Bowl?
Yeah, the Gator Bowl.
Okay.
And, we were just talking about this stuff. He goes, you know what? I don't need anybody to play competitive football till they're freshmen in high school.
Right.
He goes, if they do stay in shape and are good athletes, I can come in and teach them to play football starting in the 9th grade. I mean, would you agree with that?
I'd agree. Like my son, what I told him was when he was going into the 8th grade year, I mean, kind of that second semester of 8th year, that's when I told him, I was like, so now if you're serious about this is where we have to, like, this summer, 4 days a week, we're going to wake up at 6 a.m., we're going to do it. But the great thing was, like, he wanted to do it. I never forced him to do it. Like, he was like, hey, are we going today? And that's when you kind of know, like, that's when your kid is ready, when they're like, hey, can we go today? But if you're like, we got some kids that I see over there, and they walk in the building, and just like, this kid does not want to be here. Like, he does not want to be here. And some of it is good to make your kid get up and do certain things that they don't want to do, right? There's a life lesson in that. But if you're sending them like 4 or 5 days a week, probably not a great idea because it's not good for them. And it's not good for our program either because we're trying to like convince this kid to do stuff and it's slowing everybody else down.
So here's another question I had for you. And you're talking about a lot of the training regimens and having trainers available for these kids a little bit earlier on. Boy, I'd have to go check the dates and do an internet search, but about, 10 or 15 years ago, there was kind of a little bit of a drought of college athletes coming out of the state of Nebraska. And I remember the World Herald even had like a weekend, like 5-part series or something like that, where they kind of detailed, like, how come we had guys coming out of places like Hardington, Nebraska, and wherever. Now it's one of these things where there's even Omaha and Lincoln aren't really churning out many Division I college athletes anymore. And then all of a sudden, over about the last, especially the last, I don't know what, half dozen years, but probably over the last 10, maybe 15 years, all of a sudden there's just kind of been this growing number, and it's all sports. It's football, it's volleyball, it's boys and girls basketball, track athletes, wrestlers, baseball players, all going on to college sports. And
in Division I sports too.
Yeah, there's probably more
big time athletes.
There's probably more D1 guys coming out of the state of Nebraska than I can ever remember.
Why do you think that is?
I think training. Like, I think that changed. I think what kids were doing before, of just thinking I can just go to my high school and I'll be okay, that changed in the state of Nebraska. Like, people were like, okay, now I have to go out and get, like, to do a little extra. I have to find somebody to help me do a little bit more. I think kids and parents started figuring out that most of these sports, like, you're training year-round for a lot of the sports. Like, you're training or you're doing something year-round, and I think that's helped a lot. Also, just, that there's something about, like, you can't always be in your own pod, right? I think when kids started getting out around other kids, and like Division I athletes started training with other Division I athletes from not their school, like, it started helping build other kids. It's like, wait a minute, this kid, for us, that's what we see at the academy, is we see a kid that may be at Central and he's a good athlete and you can see it, but then we put him in an environment where there's great athletes from every school. And then all of a sudden they're seeing, like, wait a minute, what are you doing extra? Or what are you doing extra? What's your regiment? Or what are you doing? And they start talking, and then they start training together. And iron sharpens iron, right? Like, you start pulling each other up. So I think that's a lot of it. And then coaching's just gotten better. Like, I think that over the last few years, like, you see, like, really good coaches at every level. There's some bad coaches still, a lot of still bad coaches, but there's some really good coaches in Nebraska that are doing great things at the high school level. And I think that those guys are doing a great job at developing kids from a young age. And they're also allowing them to seek help from other places because they know they're not the end-all, be-all. So they've got this system to, like, yeah, you do what we do at the school, but if you have somebody that you're working with, go work with them if it's making you better.
Which I would always think, from a coaching to athlete standpoint, if you can get some different perspectives,
right,
it helps. That was one of the things that was a little interesting to me at the NFL level, because I would have been 3 different O-line coaches. By the time you got to the third O-line coach, at that, it's sort of the whole, like, youth is wasted on the young, wisdom's wasted on the old. It was one of those kind of things. By the time I got to the end of my rather short career, I'm sitting there going, like, oh my gosh, this is like, I've picked up stuff from this guy and then this guy, and now I've got this coach. I'm like, holy crap, but now my shoulders are shot. I'm slowing down, and I can't play as well as I could 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's like, God, if I had this knowledge base after working with these different coaches and these different systems and these different methods of training, how big an impact that would have had on a younger me.
Yeah.
But I would think that it'd have to have an impact. And I guess I see that. Do you see much pushback from the high school coaches at all? And I guess I ask that from the perspective.
It's a good question, though. I know,
and I don't want to. I'm not going to name names, but there was a coach in Omaha who I know did not want his guys training with any outside group,
and they suffered for it.
Yeah,
and they suffered for it. It's when we first started. 2008 is when we started training. When we first started, there was a lot of pushback. And then I think as coaches started meeting us and getting around us, they started figuring out, like, oh, these guys they're not trying to, like, like tell kids not to listen to us. They're just trying to help them with technique and give them some good advice, just be more like mentors. So there was in the beginning, but then it started to shift that when there were like coaches that were saying, hey, you should go to Warren Academy if you need this extra training. They started seeing like the thing for us is we can do more than a high school coach can do. They only have so much time to do a lot of stuff. So you can't spend a lot of time on technique. You can't spend a lot of time on film and teaching kids how to watch film as much as you'd like to, because at some point you have to get to scheme. And so at some point you have to get to teaching the game plan and focusing on how you're going to beat the other team when we can focus on what you do individually to get better and then to apply that inside of the scheme that you're playing with the game plan. So that's coaches started figuring out like I can send these guys over here and they can work on their technique and it's still going to help us win games.
So I got a recruiting question because you have 7-on-7 teams that go all over the country, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Tony was on the podcast. He was at a big 7-on-7 tournament. I think you were recently at one. My question is this, because Josh Lutke, who's the head basketball coach at Prep, good friend of mine, he's getting frustrated with the recruiting process in basketball because college coaches don't go to the high schools anymore. Mm-hmm. They only go to the AAU coaches because that's all they want to talk. They don't find out what they're like in school, what their demeanor is like. Are you finding in the space you're in and traveling as much as you do, college coaches are spending more time with you than the high school coaches?
Not as much. Basketball is just a different beast.
It is a different beast.
It's a different beast. Like my niece plays professional basketball. She played at Texas and Georgia, and I watched that recruiting process. And it's totally different than football recruiting. And quarterback recruiting is totally different than any other football recruiting. There's just different spaces where coaches go to different areas to find out. And basketball is one of those sports it's an AAU sport.
You go to an AAU game, that's where you see the college coaches watching games.
That's where they're at. It's an AAU
you get a lot of college
sport.
coaches at these 7-on-7 tournaments, don't you?
No, so that's the kind of misconception that that 7-on-7. We do 7-on-7, and I tell our parents this. Sometimes I hate 7-on-7 because it is. There's so many things that go on in a 7-on-7 tournament. It's like, this is not anything like, and it's not football anyway, right? You're supposed to use 7-on-7 as we did in college as a training tool, right? To get reps with what you're going to do in the fall. And so much that happens in 7-on-7 is like nobody's doing that.
Okay, but do you know how many recruiting websites out there go cover these 7-on-7 things and make it sound like it's if they're a star in a 7?
It's bullshit.
Okay, thank you for saying that. Thank you.
It's bullshit. Like what we use 7-on-7 for is and we do have coaches that call us and say, hey, what do you know about this kid? And we'll say, okay, this is what you can tell from a kid in 7-on-7, athletically. Doesn't mean when he puts on the pads, most kids disappear. There's a lot of 7-on-7 stars out there. They put on the pads. And you're like, what happened? Like, what happened to all these videos you were posting in March? Like now it's September and October, and we haven't heard anything from you. Like that's the thing that bothers me. And there's so many coaches out there. It's like, come play 7-on-7. We can get you recruited. I talk to college coaches all the time. They're never going to watch this. College coaches aren't watching 7-on-7 and recruiting kids. They're not doing that. They can see if a kid can run, if a kid can bend, and if he can catch. That's it. If he's got any natural cover skills, that's about as far as it's going to go. And then they're going to say, hey, come to camp, right? But they're not coming to – I've not seen very many 7 – I see writers at 7-on-7. They're there covering them.
And that's what I'm talking about, these writers and these websites.
The writers are there.
And they make it sound like, the next star. And I'm like, man, it's just not the real thing.
The writers are there, but it's good for them to be there, though, because then they get access. They get more access to the kids that they're not going to get going to the high schools, right? They get to talk to the kids and talk to the parents and talk to these guys. So it's a good place for writers to be at. And that's the other thing that 7-on-7 is good, because now it's so much about building your profile, right? And getting in front of these writers that help you get these star ratings that I think a lot are bullshit too, right? So it's like,
you know what stars are? They're a way to make money for a website.
There's some guys out there that are really good at what they do, and there's some guys that just like, don't listen to that guy.
It's called clickbait. Stars are clickbait. Oh my God, we upgraded this guy to 3.5 today.
Right.
Click.
There's good and bad with everything, and I love 7-on-7 because it allows us to teach the game. Because we use it that way. Like if you come and play 7-on-7 for us, we're not teaching you gimmicky stuff. We're running real coverages. We're teaching you about real spacing. Like if this kid is lined up here tight to the formation, he can only do this or this. this kid is lined up here and he's stacked here. One of them is going to do this or one of them is going to do that. Like, we're teaching concepts and we're teaching spacing. Our quarterbacks are learning to throw on time. We're still telling them, like, hey, sometimes you need to take a drop. You just can't stand here all the time. Like, sometimes you need to work on taking a drop when we're doing these things. But our 7-on-7 program is a development program. So we train twice a week, and one of the days is not even a practice. It's just drills and skills that you're getting with guys like the guys I mentioned before, like Veland and DeMornay and Mike Jones. And they're coming out and they're working on individual position stuff. So for us, it's really 7-on-7 is a tool for teaching.
Matt Rule dropped by the academy yet?
Not yet. I'm trying to get him in there. Not yet. Not yet.
And we're going to get on to a camp that you're going to do, but I do want to say, before we recorded last time, that the house case has been settled, and all this money is going to go in-house now. We're talking about a $20 million line item for universities to pay college athletes. Still not worked out on what Title IX looks like, if it's only going to be the revenue sports. There's a lot of stuff to figure out. But I like this model much more than the free-for-all NIL model. And I'm sure you're seeing money flying around to potential recruits all the way around. But it just seems – I'm not saying collectives are going to go away. I think their influence will have – I'm hoping less influence of what the universities can pay. What are your thoughts?
Well, now we're on the camp circuit with my son now, right? So we went to a few camps, and that did come up, not from us, but one of the coaches mentioned the revenue sharing and how he thinks collectives are going to go away. And there's a lot. I mean, for me, and you know this too, is like there's guys that are getting paid that are never going to play. Like they're never like. How many guys did we come in with that was the number one recruit at such and such, never touched the field? Like never got on the field, and then there's a guy you've never heard of that's a star all of a sudden, right? So that's the thing that bothers me about it. God bless the kids that can get their money, right? But I think there should be like, what have you done in college, right? There should be like a tier system for like guys that are actually playing and doing things, right? And then you should base it off of that instead of some kid that's got this star rating, right?
Yes.
Got this star rating because some guy that watched him run around in the T-shirt and shorts said, hey, he's a 5-star. And then they get there and they're complete. They can't play. But here's this college is giving them all this money. So I like the revenue sharing thing. I'm glad the guys are getting paid now, right? Like, I wish it was around when we were there. But
it was called the brown bag.
Yeah, a little different.
I never did get the brown McDonald's bag.
Did you get one of these? Did you get one of these?
I never got the heavy
handshake. There were some perks. There were perks.
Yeah.
Like there was some perks that we got in the community, but I never got that either.
You never got the heavy handshake?
Never.
I think Osborne really had at that time period. He kind of had a tight rein on a lot of the boosters.
Yeah, right.
Like none of the boosters wanted to get on Osborne's bad side, and that would have been. I mean, if something like that came out and made any kind of news, that would have been a number one way to get on Osborne's bad side. Yeah. So nobody wants to be the booster that the coaching staff hates.
Yeah.
So what year is your son then?
He's a sophomore. He's going to be a sophomore.
Is he a D1 player?
He just got an Iowa State offer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who was the main recruiter? Was Campbell the main recruiter on that?
No. So it was the quarterback coach.
Okay.
So the recruiting's so different now too.
So I was going to ask. My question was going to be: you had mentioned earlier, even within football, quarterback recruiting is different. Tell us how.
So quarterbacks, for one, their process is earlier. So the funny part about my son even getting this offer was we weren't going to – I've always been of the mindset, and I tell kids in our academy is if you're not invited to a camp, for one, don't go. There's no point unless you're just going for experience. Like I just want to go to Michigan and be in the big house and see what it's like. Okay, fine, go. If you're going to get recruited, if you think you're getting recruited and nobody's invited you, not happening because it doesn't happen like that at these camps. So my son, the funny thing is he's such a meathead, right? He's a 15-year-old kid, and we're sitting around one day, and my cousin, Brandon Williams, and another guy that runs Dream with me, we're in a group text. They send a text, and it's my son saying, Michigan, thank you for the invite. But it happened like 3 days before. So I'm thinking like, my son didn't even tell me that he got an invite from Michigan to go to camp. So I'm like, okay, let me figure this out. So I called Justin Camrad because his son was a quarterback who just recently went to Northern Iowa and went through this whole recruiting process. And we talked for 3 or 4 years going through the process of, Justin, I need to know. Like, what do I do? Like, I'm not planning on sending Braylon to mini camps, maybe 1 or 2. He has no varsity film besides 42 handoffs when they were up 60-0, when they were up 60-0 on all these teams. Like I told him, he was 42 for 42 handing off the ball this year at varsity. So not a lot of tape. So we're not going to go. And Justin was like, you got to get him out there. He's like, for one, he's good. So he's going to be fine. It's like, where has he been invited to? So we list him off: Iowa State, Michigan. I was like, well, Michigan, I don't know, because I felt like it was just like one of those mass come to camps, and we're trying to figure it out. And I called Paul. I was like, Paul, did you talk to Michigan about Braylon? He's like, no, I haven't talked to anybody. So we're trying to figure it out, and we're calling all these people, trying to figure out how. He's got another quarterback coach in Kansas City, Hoover, and I call him like, did you talk to Michigan? He's like, no, I didn't talk to him. So we're trying to figure this out. And Braylon's sitting there. He finally goes, oh, no, they DM'd me and invited me, and a couple coaches followed me. So I'm like, Braylon, that's not normal. Like, that doesn't – they're not sending that invite to everybody. So we're like, we got to go to camps. So we went to Iowa State. We walked up at Iowa State, though.
Just walked up.
We walked up. They knew he was coming.
By the way, their facilities are a lot different when you played up there.
Oh, way different.
I mean, it's a beautiful campus.
They knew he was coming, so we walked up. It worked out. We went to Michigan. That went good. They're now on his radar, and they're recruiting him. And went to Mizzou. That went good. Kansas State went good, so it went good. But the difference with quarterbacks and every other position is now the crazy thing, too, is for quarterbacks, it's not really about measurables. It's like simply, can you move and can you spin it? Like, if you're over 6 foot and you can spin it and you can move, you got a shot now. But every other position, you got to be 6'5". You got to run certain. It's all about measurables at every other position. Quarterbacks has switched. When it used to be, quarterbacks had to be 6'5".
Yeah.
And they had to be able to throw it all over the field. Now it's kind of changed because you see, like, these Russell Wilson types. It's different, but the recruiting happens so much earlier. Most quarterbacks are probably committed by their junior year because it's a premier position, so it's starting. Guys are trying to find quarterbacks sooner. So if we would have waited, it probably would have been a mistake. So I'm glad I talked to Camrad because he needed to get out now, even though he had no varsity tape.
I mean, is that kind of one of the things that maybe happened a little bit with a guy like Zane Flores, for instance?
Yeah,
where
he didn't do a lot of camps early.
Yeah, and it seemed like all of a sudden you're sitting there going like, man, I mean, I had firsthand experience watching Zane throw, so it's kid's got an arm. And actually, I mean, he probably beat Westside in that state title game more with his legs than he did his arm, but you got a kid who can run, you got a kid who can throw.
Yeah.
And it was one of those. I remember talking to a couple of media guys that cover recruiting. Mike Sauter was one. And I remember Mike even messaged me after that game, and he goes, man, I can't believe, like, he's got maybe like this soft offer from Okie State, and that's it. He goes, nobody else is talking to him. And he goes, I can't wrap my head around it. But yeah, it does kind of seem like that is one of the positions where if they're not on you early.
Yeah, well, Cole, Peyton.
Yeah.
Right? So Cole, all these guys, these quarterbacks that have all come out, they've all come through the academy. Like, they all train at the academy. They still come back and train. Like, they're all still, like, they get home, they'll all be over there throwing together. Cole Daniels, cool. Nate Glanz, my son, all these top quarterbacks, the guys now, Will Anderson, Madden Riggs, all the top guys are over there throwing like twice a week. Like, they're in there working together. And that's kind of like the iron sharpens iron thing. But Cole didn't do a lot of camps. Zane didn't do a lot of camps early. Daniel Kalen, his mom knew, like, I got to get him in front of people early. So that's how he got the early offer.
And that was the thing, is he was one of the few guys you saw, at least within the last, I don't know what, four to six years, that you saw that real early offer.
Right. And so she understood just that talking to enough people, like, quarterback recruiting is so different. And in Nebraska, we didn't know because there'd really been no quarterbacks that had gotten really big offers, right? Like, there's always been the option guys, Crouch and those guys, but we're in a different world now where you kind of throw it all over the field.
And those were niche guys going to niche programs to run a specific offense.
But there hadn't been a lot of high-level quarterback recruits coming out of the state of Nebraska until recently. But the difference with the guys like Zane is he didn't go to a lot of camps early. Like, going into his junior – like, after, kind of in between his junior year, he kind of did a couple, but then his junior year going to his senior year, he kind of hit the circuit. But by that time, it's too late. So you have to really hit them like now, like when my son's going as a freshman going into a sophomore year. And then between his sophomore and junior year, that's when it all happened. So and then by that time, it's kind of late because guys already have the guys they like in those classes.
Once the offer's made, I mean, does Iowa State keep calling, like, just to make sure, hey, don't forget? I mean, does the recruiting process keep going, or do they wait?
That's the funny thing about the recruiting, the early offer, though, is they can't talk to
true.
them.
I forgot.
So they can't.
I totally forgot.
It's an offer that just kind of like, it's really based off potential, right? It's probably non-committal, right? But it's one of those things where, like, we know about you, we've offered. Like, so now come up on a visit. They can do all those unofficial things now. Now they can have those communications, those things. That's what happens next. But they can't call my son. They can't call or talk to him because he's so young.
Could they text him?
They can't do any of that.
Then how did Michigan DM?
Well, they can DM and invite you to camps and do those certain things, but they can't just like, hey, call him and say, hey, Braylon, how you doing today?
Okay.
Like, he can call them.
Okay.
He can initiate conversation. So that can happen, but they can't.
That's ass backwards, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that makes zero sense to me.
Yeah. Agreed.
You can call, but you can't call
The
them.
rules are stupid.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was one time. I mean, head coach at Houston, basketball coach Kelvin Sampson. Hell, he got a show cause for texting. I mean, that is.
Right.
I mean, think about it. I mean, that was how the rules have now changed.
Right.
I mean, and you got to wonder now, with the NCAA maybe yielding less influence and with the money that's going to be flowing around, if a lot of this stuff changes, because you are really making a business investment. I mean, it's about the money, and you're going to see. And how do you guys feel about this? Because you guys were part of the NFL union. Do you think, with the way it's going, that college football needs a union and players should collective bargain?
It's coming, though.
I would agree with you.
I think the should becomes irrelevant because the collective bargaining aspect of it is going to end up becoming a part of this process. I mean, it's you saw this huge, really sudden shift of, I don't know if power is the right word, but in terms of controlling the situation, all of that control shifted to the athletes.
Mm-hmm.
That pendulum swung so far in the direction of the athletes, and the universities were so far out of control that they didn't have the ability to control anything. At some point, that pendulum swinging back, and that's where the collective bargaining comes in, where when you talk about collective bargaining, and I mean, again, it's its own little Pandora's box, because the players are going to sit there going, hey, we want collective bargaining. We want the ability to sit around a table with you, and we want to, here's what we want. Here's what we want to negotiate for. Now, that becomes a key word, because then the universities are going to come back and say, all right, now we're talking.
Yeah.
It's a negotiation.
Yeah.
Here's what we need from you guys. And so overall, though, I think this is going to be a very good thing, moving in that, moving in that direction, because there's going to be a little bit of a give and take, and you're not going to have, I mean, for years and years and years, I mean, I've said repeatedly, I don't want to, I think Joe Mowgli, who's been on the podcast a few times, I might have pissed Coach Mowgli off a little bit, because I was always a huge proponent of NIL and the transfer portal, because the whole time I was going through, and I sat on a handful of NC2A committees when I was in college, you got to see behind the curtain there a little bit. You got to see what went on behind the scenes and how all of that worked, and you realized how little power the student athletes had. You saw the huge amount of earning potential and the dollars that were flowing from all of those efforts. And it's easy to say, well, you got a scholarship, you got an education out of it. Okay, I will also say that most athletes who play a college sport, any sport, probably the single biggest determinant isn't talent or any other kind of natural ability. It's the people who are willing to do what it takes to be a student athlete at that level, because it's brutally hard. Some of that power needed to come away from the university and go to the student athletes. I'd be willing to listen to the argument that maybe too much went in that direction in a very short period of time, and you now need that pendulum to kind of swing back somewhere in the middle, and that's where collective bargaining sits.
Yeah, I think it's moving in the right direction because obviously there's something that has to be done. Like it can't stay how it is now, right? It can't. It's just too much.
Yeah.
There's too much out of control. There's too much tampering. There's just not enough. There's not enough governance on it right now for it to stay like this. Like there's too many bad things that are happening along with the good that you're like, okay, we got to do something to kind of take control of the situation. The other part is I think there just needs to be more education from the college side from these kids that are getting the money, right? What are they? Because there's the tax part of it, right?
Financial literacy. Oh, I'm 53 and I still don't have financial literacy.
Right. So there's just so many other things that should come along with it. But overall, I think it's a good thing. The transfer portal is a whole nother ball of wax. The one thing I talked to a college coach about was this past year was how many times when you sit now with recruits, is it about NIL? Is it about how many kids want to know about winning? He's like, very, very little kids talk about winning. Very little kids talk about graduating. It's all parents. Parents first thing they want to know is like, what's the collective like? Like it's not how many kids you graduate. He said they very rarely hear that.
That's the wrong reasons.
Yeah, they very rarely hear like how many kids graduated last year. But if you think about it, like if a kid transfers, we've all been to college, and you knew like if I transfer to certain schools, all my credits aren't going to transfer. So if a kid transfers 4 or 5 times, how many credits does he have to be a junior or a senior, right? If they're not transferring everywhere. Yeah. I asked Dennis that one time, and he said it's kind of it's hard to navigate when a kid is transferred 2 or 3 times to figure out when he can actually graduate to how many credits he's bringing along with him, and people don't think about that.
Yeah. Or how much work you've done along the way that doesn't count at the end. Like how much work gets lost because of that.
No. One more question about your kid. Damon's been on the podcast. We talked about the recruiting process for him and how he really tried to stay out of it. He got really emotional about the legacy. Do you care if your kid goes to Nebraska or not?
I do and I don't. And I probably don't more than I do. Because at the end of the day, it's his journey. And I think you would probably agree with this. Like I chose Nebraska because it was good for me. Like it was good for me. Like I didn't stay in Missouri because that wasn't a good fit for me. So if my son was to choose Nebraska, would I be happy? Yes. But if he doesn't, I'm going to be happy just the same because he has to choose what's the best place for him. And even with the academy, we kind of get this question a lot. It's like, how come you don't try to send more guys to Nebraska? Like, that's not our job. Our job is to get them to the place where they can get a scholarship from Nebraska. But our job is to get them to choose what is best for them and our fit. It's Nebraska's job to get them to Nebraska. It's the coach's job to recruit them there. Our job is to get them to where they want to be.
I'm going to make a lot of listeners mad because this is pretty much a Nebraska football podcast.
And you hate Nebraska?
No, I do not. But that's a smart business decision because if you would lose trust of other coaches that came into to look at your players if they just thought all you're doing is funneling people, right?
Right. Devin Jackson, I talk to him all the time. He's at Oregon. And I think that was a great decision for Devin. Like, would I like to see him play for Nebraska and not leave here? Of course, right? Do we want to see Nebraska where it's at right now? Absolutely not. And there's a lot of kids that have left that could have helped. But they left because of the Nebraska, right? Like not feeling like it's a fit for them. So that's not our job. Like my job is to help that kid and that family get ready to play college football. It's the college's job to recruit that kid to get them there. Do I want our kids to go to Nebraska? Yes. But I also want them to go to the best place that fits for them.
Missouri's coming to Omaha. Rob, did you know that? Missouri's coming to Omaha.
I had heard tell.
So from field to the court is July 12th and 13th. This is a combination of the Warren Academy, the Tolliver Family Foundation, Creighton University, and the Dream Foundation. Now, the reason it's the field to the court is because another Springfield native, Anthony Tolliver. Yeah. How much older are you than Anthony?
Oh, so the funny thing is Anthony's cousin and my brother were really good friends. So I remember watching Anthony. I'm probably a good 10 years older than Anthony.
Okay.
Like a good 7 to 10 years older than Anthony. Like I remember watching him as like I would come back from college and he was like a 12, 13-year-old, right? And it's like, man, who was this?
Looked like Urkel,
giraffe-looking kid, right?
He looked like Urkel.
Huge feet. He was just gangly. And I was like, who is this kid running around the park? Like he could barely walk. And Then I come back a few years later, and we went to we're same high school. Springfield's not a big place, right? So our families all knew each other. So he came to Creighton, right? I come to Nebraska. Lori Endicott actually did volleyball with us in Springfield. So there's this huge Nebraska connection to this from the field to the court. We're not doing volleyball this year because she couldn't make it work. But there's this huge Nebraska connection, and it just made sense for us to bring it to Omaha.
So it's a free camp. So the good thing, because you're doing it for kids who really can't afford camp and get into that, right? So, do you divide it up, all of them at basketball and all of the football, or do they split it up to where if you want basketball, go to basketball, go to football, go to football?
It's the first initiative is for the kids that can't afford to go to a quality camp. So we reach out to all the groups that have those kids. So we open up so many spots for them, and then once those are kind of filled and they say, well, this is the kids we're bringing, then we open it up to it's still capacity. So kids can go to both. Like when we do it in Missouri, we do football in the morning because it's always hot, it's summertime. We want to get that out of the way, and then we go do basketball in the afternoon. Traditionally, what we've done. This year, it's the 12th is basketball and the 13th is football, so they're able to go to both. And it's just really the first come, first served who signs up.
So, again, if you just go to, where do they sign up at?
WarrenAcademy.com.
WarrenAcademy.com. Also, they're looking for corporate sponsors. You and I can talk about that afterwards. Maybe I can help you out a little bit.
Appreciate that.
So, but it's free for kids. What are the ages here?
It's 4th through 8th grade.
4th through 8th grade. It's going to be at Creighton University. It's July 12th through the 13th. Go to WarrenAcademy.com. You've been committed to the kids of this community since you came back. I mean, I remember having you on for the Dream Academy. It's good catching up. We shouldn't make it so long. Man.
Yeah,
we gotta
do it more often.
You gotta tell Niles he can come on the podcast.
Oh yeah, he was just across the street too. He was just training. Actually, he was training my nephew. My nephew was in working with him right now. So Niles is a great coach, great dude. You got to get him on.
He was my favorite Redskin for a while, which is kind of saying stuff because I didn't have a lot of favorite Redskins.
Not a lot.
Rob, be politically correct. It's the Commanders.
It is now the Commanders. It was the Redskins when Niles.
It's still the Redskins to me, and the Cleveland's still the Indians. Right. I don't care. You're not going to change my mind. All right. Steve Warren, thank you so much, my friend. It's good to have you on the podcast. We promise you don't have to wait another month. I think Rob and I are going to be back in the studio. I mean, we're not going to give away the guests, but
should be in a week.
And it may be one of the. If you think Rob's really smart, we may have found somebody who might be just as smart.
So you're saying Steve's not very smart?
No. I'm not saying that.
Don't start the D-line, O-line thing here. Don't start that.
Hey, real quickly, now in its 10th year of the Doc Talk podcast, thanks for listening. Visit Husker Hounds, 2 locations in the Omaha area and online at huskerhounds.com. Adidas Sideline Apparel arriving daily. 200 new styles of T-shirts. Start thinking about school next year. You got the backpacks and big and tall stuff. They got 3X and 5X stuff.
I do get my stuff from Scott.
Scott's a great man.
And
He's been here for us a long time.
Poster schedule with a purchase. The Orr Law Group. Connor Orr is our resident NIL expert. He's a damn fine lawyer. Go to orlawgrp.com or call Connor at 402-408-6488. Centris Federal Credit Union. The Centris Federal Credit Union Music Festival coming up at Stinson Park in Exarban on Saturday, July 27th. Starts at 2 o'clock, goes up until 10 o'clock. Food trucks, fireworks, and music. In fact, Owen Justice is going to be on the stage right around 6:30. And Husker Max, David Max, and Joe Hudson, those guys are so great to distribute this podcast. We appreciate it. For Dr. Rob Zadiska, for Steve Warren, I'm Travis Justice. We will talk to you next time on the Doc Talk Podcast.